Good morning and welcome to this new video. Have you ever had any unpleasant surprises when using a new camera? Well, I do, and with every new camera I have to adjust the parameters in order to optimize my experience and not miss my photos. So in this video I'm going to share with you 10 settings that I changed right away instead of trusting the factory setting. And don't miss the end of this video either, because I'm sharing a bonus setting to avoid that kind of problem. You may already know what it is, but I'll show you how you can avoid that. It happens a lot more than you may think. If you don't know me, my name is Pierre T. Lambert. I'm a travel photographer and the creator of the 30-day method to great photos, a step-by-step approach to training your photographer's eyes and developing your skills. I also share photography adventures and tutorials on this YouTube channel, so make sure to subscribe. And if you're ready, let's get right into it. Okay, grab your camera. The first thing you want to change or decide on, be intentional about, is going to be the format of your files. Do you want your photos to be in RAW and JPEG, or do you want them to be just in RAW or just in JPEG? What does that mean? Well, RAW format means that you're gonna have an image file that has lots of information in them, right? But you're gonna have to process it in an editing software after. JPEG means it's a photo that you actually see, like you see it at the back of your screen, and you can directly transfer it to your phone, send it to a friend, and do a bunch of things with it. Now, why wouldn't you just shoot in JPEG? Well, you can, but you have less flexibility if you're trying to achieve certain creative results in post-production with your image. If you're trying to recover shadows or highlights or do very advanced things, the RAW format will have a lot more information for you to be able to achieve that. The JPEG will crumble very quickly. Another important thing is that in the JPEG, your white balance is locked in, but in the RAW format, you can always tweak it later to your liking. So it's up to you. There's no good rule. If you're shooting in JPEG, some cameras like Panasonic, Fuji allows you to add looks or recipes or styles, depending on how they call it, or LUTs, to actually get a result that's almost like edited straight into the JPEG. It's baked in and it looks great. Super easy for everyday use. You can send it to your phone to a friend in 2 seconds. If you're trying and love to post-process, shoot in RAW, and if you're not sure, you can shoot in RAW and JPEG. I do that often when I'm in circumstances when I'm not exactly sure, but personally in 99% of cases I am shooting in RAW, editing them quickly on Lightroom with my presets, and then I share them like that. I love it, and I can recover more things if I need to and adjust the white balance. You do have to know that shooting in RAW also will take up more space on your memory card than if you shoot in JPEG, and if you shoot in RAW and JPEG it will take even more space. So really it's gonna have to be a personal choice. Now the second thing I'm gonna turn on in my camera is going to be the grid line display. What is it? Those are basically grids that you can show on top of your image in order to help you with the composition, okay? I usually turn on the rule of third. The rule of third just helps me give, for example, 1/3 of my image to the bottom part of a landscape or a city, and 2/3 to the sky or the contrary, or even place my subject strategically in one of the intersection of one of those lines. That's a creative choice. That's how I like to compose images. I like the rule of third one, but if I'm doing also architectural work, or if I need to have a perfect symmetry, another one that works really well is the one with the diagonal and the center of your image, the center cross. It's very easy to actually compose your images like that. Depending on your camera, you can also turn on a level that will tell you if you're tilted or not. That helps keep your horizon straight, and that's something I see a lot of people actually miss, is having the horizon a little bit tilted. So now the third one, which is also linked to the screen that I'm going to turn on, are zebra highlights. What are the zebras? The zebras are not for the zoo, although that would be funny. It is actually a visual aid to tell you when something is overexposed in your image. It's extremely helpful if you're shooting in manual, you're not sure if you're clipping your highlights or not. This will basically show zebras in the parts where you're losing information in your image, and you can choose from what level you want the zebras to appear. I put it for photos to 100+, so that I know I'm completely losing information in those parts, and when I'm taking my photos, I can very easily adjust my settings and my exposure compensation depending on what results I am trying to achieve here, okay? Another one that's very helpful is once you've taken the photo, and that's present on all cameras, you can also turn on a visual aid that will blink for the highlights or the blacks that are completely clipped. Turn this on to make sure your photos are exactly the way you want them to be right in your camera. Now, number 4 is going to be autofocus modes. Extremely important because you want to be in control of what will be in focus in your image, okay? By default, for example, on Sony cameras, it is set to AFA, which is autofocus automatic, and it's supposed to guess for you how it's gonna focus on your image. Is it gonna focus only once, or is it gonna focus continuously? And that is important to decide. So I turn off the AFA and I switch to AFS or AFC. And on Panasonic, it's called S or C. On Canon, it may be called AI Servo for AFC. But basically, this is how they work. AFS is a single autofocus, meaning you autofocus. If you have pressed your shutter or press on the AF on, your autofocus get locked in on whatever it decided to focus on. And then if your subject is moving forward or backward or sideways, or if you're changing your frame, well, the autofocus, as long as you stay pressed on that autofocus button, it will stay the same, meaning your focus plane is not changing. So it works great when doing static subjects. But let's say I'm doing street photography and the bike is coming towards me. If I use that mode, it will autofocus on the bike when it was maybe 2 meters further than it is when I actually press the shutter. So in order to solve that problem, there is the mode AFC, which is continuous, which means as long as I press on my autofocus button, it will continuously adjust the focus on where I've decided it to be. So let's say I'm taking a photo of that bike again. Well, as long as I keep pressing, it's gonna focus on the bike. Even if the bike gets closer to me, I will always have that bike in focus. Now that brings us to number 5, the autofocus area. Extremely important to know where your camera is gonna focus. This is literally why your photos may not be sharp, because maybe the camera is focusing where you don't want it to be. So there's several modes. It's gonna be wide, zone, center fix, spot, expanded spot, tracking. So wide is going to be a mode that a lot of people will love and use. Why? Because it just lets the camera decide where to focus. I personally am not a big fan. I'll explain to you why in a second. But when you're in wide, if you turn on subject detection, which I highly recommend, for example, put it on a human, well, the camera will try to focus on the human in the frame and recognize it nowadays. Okay, this is great, but look, if I'm in a busy street and I'm trying to take street photos and I'm trying to choose a particular subject, but there is several in my frame, I need to be very intentional about where I put that focus point. So for that, I'm gonna go down to focus area and spot, and then I can choose the size of the spot, but I will basically keep it in the smallest and decide exactly where I want that focus point to be. And when I have pressed, it's gonna do the focus only there, even if there are other subjects around. Very important. Always be intentional with your autofocus. It will help you get better and sharper photos. While we're at it, if you find this video helpful, make sure you give it a big thumbs up and let me know in the comments what you would add to that list, and let's continue. Now, number 6, have you ever been in a quiet area and someone walks in with a camera? Maybe they seem to be a little new with a camera, and every time they take a photo you hear, or they focus, you hear beep 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 beep, and obviously everyone's looking at them. It's kind of weird. When I'm doing street photography, I want to be discreet. When I was shooting weddings, it was the same, and for that you need to deactivate right now all the beeps in your camera. Okay, cameras love to beep, and usually it is when your focus is locked in. I personally disable it to stay as discreet as possible. I still have a visual aid that is like green or red depending on what you choose, and that allows me to know if I'm in focus or not. I don't need to hear it necessarily, especially in the streets or in very quiet environment when I'm not trying to disturb a scene. Well, I really don't want those beep beeps. Number 7 is linked to the touchpad and the touch panel. What is that? So it allows you to use the screen even when your eye is there as a touch screen to move your focus point around or tap and focus on a certain area. You can decide if you want half the screen to be on, the whole screen to be a touchpad, or just a corner of the screen to be a touchpad. It is literally like a laptop touchpad at the end to move your focus point around. Extremely helpful, saves you a lot of time on the field, allows you to shoot with a viewfinder, which I love. And like I said before, to be intentional. This is possible on Canons, on Sony, I'm pretty sure on all the other manufacturers too. You can let me know in the comments. Now, number 8, if you want to avoid long frustration when you're doing long exposure, disable right now the long exposure noise reduction if you're shooting in RAW. Why? Because cameras will basically process the image after it's been taken for as long as it was taken. So let's say you do a 20-second or 30-second long exposure, the camera will be crunching numbers for 20 or 30 seconds to reduce the noise in the image, but that will only affect the JPEG image and not the raw image. So if you're shooting raw, disable it completely. There's been so many instances I'm doing night photography and I'm waiting, and then I have a new camera and then I forgot to turn off that, and next thing you know, I'm waiting a whole minute before I can take another photo or do anything with the camera because I can't even review it while it's processing. So you can disable that right now in your camera if you know you're going to be shooting raw. Now, number 9 is important for workflow. It's going to be to change how files are being named. Personally, I always add a prefix that is linked to the name of my camera. For example, if I have a A7CR, I'm going to call that prefix in 3-letter ACR, so that when I have all my photos on my laptop, I am easily able to tell which one is from which camera, because I have maybe an everyday camera and then a bigger one, and so I want to be able to differentiate those images. And for some cameras that allow it, I also add a date prefix so that I always know what date that photo was taken with which camera, and then there is just the file numbering, and that is cool. Also, I turn on the ability to create a new folder per day for what I create. It is extremely helpful when I organize all my photos and my shoots. I know this is coming from that day and this is coming from that day. And for that, there is something important to check, and that's going to be the point number 10, date and time zone of your camera. Make sure you set that right. That will save you a lot of time and headaches when you're looking at your files later. I personally sort them by hour it was shot in my Lightroom library in Bridge, and so I'm able to tell historically where my photos are. And if you're using several cameras, make sure you synchronize the time together so that when you're reviewing all the photos at once, they will be organized properly at the moment you shot it, and not one at 9 a.m. and one at 12 a.m. but they were actually shot at the same time. I'm saying that because this happened to me more than it should have. Now, you could technically correct the date and time it was shot at after, but why would you do that when you can get it right in camera? And now the bonus parameter, if you're ending up with photos like that and you don't know why, make sure right away that you are not in silent mode on your camera. This is what we call banding. It basically creates like awful lines in your image. It has to do with the frequency of the light and how your camera takes a photo. So if you can, stay in mechanical shutter if you have that, meaning turning off the silent mode will do the trick, and check if your camera has an anti-flickering setting that you can set and adjust in order to compensate for those issues. All right, that was a lot. I hope you took notes. Now let me know in the comments if you would add anything to that list, and make sure you grab your free cheat sheet with the settings I use daily in different circumstances. It's available in the description, and remember, get out there, go shoot, try something different, try something new. I will see you in the next one.